Hey guys, Jay here. Welcome to Models Memories Weekly, episode 115. Models Memories is a show about nothing and is filmed in front of a live studio audience. This is a show where I talk about my painting, modeling, and working experiences from the week. Now you might be thinking to yourself, Jay, you put out 3 YouTube videos a week. How could I possibly have more to say? Well, I do, and here goes. This week, everybody drop everything. New Primaris Lieutenant. But this one is maybe slightly interesting because it ties into the new Space Marine 2 video game. It's Captain Titus, who is back from the dead. I really like the idea that he was summarily executed at the end of the game when the Inquisitor and the Black Templar show up to arrest him because he was in the presence of chaos, and that's just too big a crime. And it just kind of shows how awful the Imperium is, because clearly Titus is the awesomest, greatest hero of all time. And is like, you need heroes like him in the world of the Imperium. Like, he single-handedly, basically, well, not single-handedly, well, you are playing the video game. He pretty much single-handedly stopped an orc invasion and a chaos invasion. And for, you know, his reward for doing that incredible service was to be just, like, taken out behind the shed and shot. But apparently that's not what happened. I'm sure we'll get like a tiny little bit of lore on what's been going on since, you know, the end of the first game and the start of the second game, but hopefully Space Marine 2 is just going to be the same game again, but just with new locations and new enemies and maybe some new weapons, maybe some of the new Primaris weapons, because those sorts of video games, you don't want to stray too far. You don't want to change it up. Usually really good video game sequels are just more of the same, just more stabbing and punching and combos and stomping on some orcs' heads. But the new miniature. Lieutenant Titus storms to action with new miniature in Space Marine the board game. The new Titus miniature. First to good. He's got it's a pretty good likeness of him. He's got a good kind of screamy sneer on his face. He's got the new Primaris armor, which is great. Everything about it looks awesome. He's got some decent battle damage. Somehow he's got a bullet hole in him, which seems weird because he's fighting the Tyranid. Although the Tyranid have like flesh borers and stuff that are basically just bullets, so it makes sense. The pose. The pose is odd. It really looks like he's kind of skipping his way across the battlefield. He's playing a little hopscotch. Now, it's just, and he's standing up on like one little piece of rock, and he looks very off balance. It's odd. It's a very odd pose. I don't think it'd be the hardest thing in the world to change. I think if you switched which foot was touching the ground and you made it the front foot touching the ground and the back foot is coming off of the ground, it would give him a lot more forward momentum, like he's charging, which would make more sense with that power or with the chain sword. And he's a Space Marine, so it'd be pretty darn easy to kit bash him however you want. You just cut those arms off and put him back however you want, or put on different Primaris arms. But yeah, the pose. I wonder, Games Workshop, I feel like has been maybe not nailing Space Marine poses lately. And it's a little bit tricky because there's only so many times you can use like the heroic standing, one arm in the air, aiming your bolt gun. There's only so many variations of that you can do, but it kind of looks like maybe at the Games Workshop offices, they have a couple of the McFarlane Space Marine action figures, and they're kind of using those, playing with them at their desks to get some Space Marine poses, because they really should be using like art poses. Like if you just look up like art poses online, you'll find like pictures of like dancers and stuff, and you get these really dynamic, crazy poses, and you should take those and then lay Space Marine armor on top of those poses. Because the problem with the McFarlane is you get Buzz Lightyear poses. You just get these action figure-y poses, and they don't look incredible. The poses weird me out a little bit, but overall the model is okay. And it's Captain Titus. It's kind of interesting, and I'm sure he's a direct representation of how he exists in the game with those purity seals and the chain around his arm, which I for a second thought it was the Indomitus Crusade Greave that you get from the Indomitus minis, but I think it's just a normal Primaris Greave with a chain on it, with a Deathwatch symbol, which could mean that he was potentially part of the Deathwatch. We'll find out what his punishments were for surviving chaos in the first game, but it would have been really cool if he showed up in the next game with a Deathwatch shoulder pad. We already know he doesn't because of the trailer, but that would have been really interesting if he actually spent time in the Deathwatch and now he's here to take on the Tyranid with all the knowledge he acquired in the Deathwatch. That would have been pretty awesome. pro tip for all you Space Marine players out there, if you want to sprinkle some really cool little goodies throughout your force, get the Death Watch upgrade sprue. It comes with, I think, like 10 shoulder pads with the Death Watch. And all Space Marines give some of their soldiers to the Death Watch every couple hundred years, and they serve in the Death Watch, and if they survive the Death Watch, they come back to the chapter and they put back on, or they repaint their armor the chapter colors, but they do keep one Death Watch shoulder pad. And so it's just a really cool way to add flavor to your guys. You're like, that guy served in the Death Watch. And it's just awesome. I have a bunch of Death Watch shoulder pads in my Black Templar Crusade. This new Captain Titus model is part of Space Marine the board game, which is just Captain Titus doing his little skip to Maloo my darling pose with about 20 Ormagants, or actually Termagants. And it doesn't look like much else. It'll be interesting to see what this board game actually is. Games Workshop and their little board games, I would love, it's impossible because so many of them are out of print and nobody cares and everyone just buys them for the miniatures anyway. It used to be back in the day that Games Workshop would kind of make these board games as a way to sell big boxes until they learned they can just sell big boxes full of miniatures. And so you'd see things like Speed Freaks, Gangs of Kamarog, that would just be, Death Watch Overkill. I bought a few boxes of Death Watch Overkill for the minis, but it'd be really fun to actually try all of these board games and see, like, was there actually a good board game hidden under all of that, like, Warhammer 40K goodness? This board game, it looks just to be a completely flat board with a bunch of miniatures on it and some dice. I'd love to know, is this actually like a fun board game? Like, would you break this out at like the family gathering and be like, we're gonna play Space Marine the board game, and mom is gonna play the Tyranids? I would love to try them. I would love to try all of Games Workshop's little games to see what if there were some actual gems in there. They made a game, Lost Patrol, which was actually very good. It's actually a game that they made a long time ago, and they refreshed it a few years ago, quite a few years ago, like 5 or 6 or 7 years ago. But it's a kind of a dungeon explorer where you've got these hex tiles, and as your Space Marine scouts move across this hex map, it's revealed, and then another player plays the Gene Stealers. And if you play the rules as written, it was impossible for the Space Marine scouts to ever win a game. Like, absolutely impossible. The Gene Stealers would just one-shot the scouts. You've only got 5 scouts. I think there was like 8 or 12 Gene Stealers. But if we changed the rules a little bit to make it a little bit more balanced, and it actually is a really fun game. So I would love to give all of the little Games Workshop games a try. And chief among them, Space Marine the board game, because what could this game possibly be? Good old Captain Titus. I do wish he died. Because I think it would have been a beautiful cherry on top of a very good game. I liked Space Marine 1 a lot. And I wonder if they're going to make a whole series of Space Marine games that are all Captain Titus now. Like Captain Titus versus the Necrons, Captain Titus versus Chaos again, Captain Titus versus the Dark Eldar. And it's just kind of going to become like a meme. Like, he's going to become Doom Guy, where he's just constantly the same guy doing battle against all of the denizens of the Warhammer universe. That'd be kind of fun. But it'd also be kind of fun if we got a new character every single time, and a new character every single time who always saves the day, does everything right, and then is killed by the Imperium of Man for being just too good a guy. It would be such a beautiful way to reinforce how nasty the Imperium is. Because that's one thing that has kind of fallen down a little bit in the world of Warhammer is the Imperium nobody is the good guy in Warhammer 40k, except for maybe the Farside Enclave. Everything is awful. There is only war. To live in this universe is to live in the worst possible time. All of that good jazz on the first page of every Warhammer rulebook. But the Imperium, the only thing you ever see of the Imperium is the heroics of the main characters of all of these novels. And it kind of makes it seem like, yeah, the Imperium does some gross stuff, but we're still fighting for good old humanity against the aliens. Where in reality, we really need to join forces with the Eldar and the Tau and just deal with the orcs and chaos and the Tyranids. Like, that's the only way that this galaxy actually survives any of this crazy conflict, but it'll never ever happen as long as we're shoveling all of our psychers into the Golden Throne. It'll be interesting. I do appreciate that the narrative never expands. I think what I would love is a non-canonical comic book the Mini Wargaming actually did a campaign as part of their vault about this, about what would happen if the galaxy, if the story actually progressed. And they did have all of the races kind of combined to fight against Chaos and the Tyranids. And in the last-ditch effort, they're all fighting against waves of Tyranids, and they've invented a time machine to go back in time to try to save the past from the future. It was kind of fun, and I would love a non-canonical story about that. I do believe that the story shouldn't actually progress, because that can lead to some annoying things, and everybody has their little pocket of 40k that they really enjoy, and so I wouldn't want that to dry up in service of the plot moving forward, and some people to be left behind because they don't particularly like this plot progression. But I like the idea of some non-canonical 40k stories. I mean, my favorite Star Wars stuff is non-canonical, so it's all fiction. You can do whatever you want. And speaking of fiction, you can do whatever you want, Games Workshop, in a new teaser for Warhammer The Old World, has revealed the factions that are going to be the main players in the new old Warhammer game. And there are some interesting omissions. The core factions are going to be the Empire of Man, the Dwarven Mountain Holds, the Kingdoms of Bretonnia, the Wood Elf Realms. Scott, the miniature maniac, will be very happy about that one. The High Elf Realms, the Orcs and Goblin Tribes, the Warriors of Chaos, the Beastmans of Bayards, and the Tomb Kings of Khemri. So all great choices. I'm really excited for the Tomb Kings because I'm sure the Necrosphinx is going to make a comeback, and that model is absolutely awesome. The Wood Elves are fine. They have some cool dragons. The Dwarven Mountain Holdings is kind of nice. I really like the helicopters that the dwarves have, so I would love to see those make a comeback. Everything else is fine. They're just normal, like fantasy fellas. A little Lord of the Rings light, if you will. But interestingly, some factions that are not included in this are the Dark Elves, the Skaven, the Vampire Counts, the Demons of Chaos, the Ogre Kingdoms, the Lizardmans, and the Chaos Dwarves, which except for the Chaos Dwarves, all of those have been kind of refreshed into Age of Sigmar factions. They made the leap from the Death of the Old World into the new game Age of Sigmar. And so they're not being omitted from the game, but they're just not going to be the major players, and they'll be provided rules at launch, according to this article. Which, it always surprised me that Lizardmen were actually called Lizardmen, because surely the Lizardmen don't call themselves Lizardmen. They're not walking around being like, isn't this crazy that we're like lizard people? Like, I thought Seraphon sounds like the name that dinosaurs would name themselves, but no, they're the Lizardmen. But everything else makes sense. It is interesting. I'm nervous for Old World. I never played Warhammer Fantasy Battles, but if it's a 30k style game, you've got your Age of Sigmar, and then you got your other game called Old World, which is a larger, bigger strategy battle game. The 30k is absolutely genius. It is absolutely genius from a marketing standpoint because it's all Space Marines. Yes, there's a little bit of Solar Auxilia and Mechanicus, but no one has those things. It's the Space Marine game, and everybody buys the same old Space Marines, and you paint them a new fun color, and you've got two different factions. But Old World is all individual stuff, and they're pulling a lot of old kits back into circulation, which is fine, but the old kits were old for a reason. They're really old. Some of the stuff is rough. And if they're going to be making some new stuff, which apparently they are going to be making a new stuff for all 9 of those core factions. So hopefully those guys will be looking pretty good. And then some of these other factions aren't going to be getting new kits, but hopefully you can maybe swap in some of the Age of Sigmar versions of it. Like the Lizardmen. The Lizardmen just got a range refresh, but is it going to look weird if you have some of the new cool Lizardmen refresh sculpts on your 25mm square bases? I don't know. Old World, I'm nervous for Old World. I think it might be a disaster. I know there's tons of fans of old fantasy battles, but Age of Sigmar is just cooler. Age of Sigmar is a different game than Warhammer Fantasy Battles. It is the fantasy version of 40k, and it is much more kind of sillier and high fantasy, but a brand new game out of the gate with 9 factions and more on the way is gonna be, even if I wanted to play Old World, I want to be a great little consumer for Games Workshop. I want to play this game. I'm only buying some models from one faction, where if I wanted to get into 30K, I'm buying the same models that everybody else is buying. Games Workshop only has to make a few kits to service everyone. Where here, Games Workshop is going to be refreshing like maybe a couple hundred models, a couple hundred unique units, so that I can buy 4, and someone else can buy 4 different ones, and someone else can buy 5 different ones. It seems like you're really spreading yourself thin real quick. I don't know, it'll be very interesting. It'll be very interesting to see what happens with Old World. I'm sure it'll be neat. I'm sure it'll be well done, but I just wonder how popular it's going to be. Because there's also competition now. Like before, there really was only Warhammer Fantasy Battles, but now, I mean, I know there are people out there who play Mantic's Kings of War. Conquest Last Argument of Kings by Parabellum is great, and they have tons and tons of miniatures that are much more modern and grimdark and interesting. It'll be interesting. It'll be really interesting to see what happens with Old World. I'm interested. I'm excited for it. But I am much more excited for Age of Sigmar, and they have some new miniatures coming to the cities of Sigmar in the form of a Knight and Squire, a Build-A-Bear style kit. I like the new Cities of Sigmar Knights a lot. The old ones were classic, and there was some fun to be had because they were just dudes and you could kind of paint them fun colors, where the new ones actually have really kind of interesting armor and stuff going on. Some would say they're a little bit too embellished, and that's definitely an argument to be had there because they are very full. They're very full of decorations, but I have painted a couple of miniatures in my day, and I actually don't think it matters that much the level of decoration your miniatures have. They can be super embellished and they can be very easy to paint. They can be very simple miniatures and they can be very hard to paint. It all depends on what you decide to do with them. Like I would say if you took the Cities of Sigmar models, sprayed them lead belcher, dry brushed them with like Stormhost Silver or Runefang Steel, and then just picked out their little capes, I think they would look great. And if you just carefully paint every single little detail, I think they would also look great. There's always ways to take on a miniature and have it just kind of work out in the time frame that you want it to work out in. But I like this. I like these guys a lot. They're Knights of old, but they're changed and tweaked just enough to make them kind of new and exciting. I like that their armor is pointy and it's kind of made up of these geometric shapes. I do like the kind of filigree and the sort of like fleur-de-lis embellishments and things. I like that the way that their capes kind of flow under and over their armor. They have some really good under armor, you could say. And I do like that this is a Build-A-Bear style kit with lots of options. I think the option I would go with is the Pistolier guy. The Akimbo Flintlocks. They're probably not even flintlocks. They'd probably be wheel locks at this point. They look great. I've heard a couple people say they don't really like these guns. I love them. They look so much fun. They look like hand cannons. They've just got a huge giant lump of steel right in the chamber that houses the explosion. They're literally hand cannons, and I really like it. And also, I do like that the shields, having just a completely flat shield to do whatever you want in is great if you want to do all the business. But I do like the way that Games Workshop is handling it, where you've kind of got a fairly decorated shield with just a spot right in the middle for a decal. So you can paint that shield a color, throw a decal right there in the middle, and you're off to the races, as opposed to kind of having to come up with something for every single shield. I like these guys a lot. They're really fun. I think they've definitely taken a lot of inspiration, and I'm sure they've been working on this stuff for years, but it reminds me a lot of Curse City and kind of the vampire hunter thing. I really like these guys, and I love the Squire. It says in the article that he's picked from the best squires. He's one of the best squires to ever squire. I like that he's got his reliquary, which I thought would just had like a zombie head in it. And it is a zombie head, but like it's his mom. Like it's a zombie head. It's a necromanced head of like a family member. And so it talks to him. It's really weird. I love it. I really like it because immediately when I first saw it, I'm like, yeah, this squire managed to kill a zombie, took the head and he stuck it in his little birdhouse. But no, the head has a backstory. I like it. I like it a lot. These guys are really fun. The horses that they showed off at Adepticon were absolutely beautiful. So much good stuff for the Cities of Sigmar. I would say they are a little better than the old plastic kit for the Bretonnians. Just a little bit better. And man, there's so many Age of Sigmar factions that I want to play, and I feel like they keep getting knocked down because of the new stuff coming out. Because I like the vampire cults, I really like the Caradron overlords, and I really like the lizardmen, and now I really like the cities of Sigmar. I mean, I'm definitely going to get some of these guys for Warcry, because they better have Warcry rules, and I'm going to use them in Warcry. Which Warcry, by the way, is fantastic. If you like Kill Team, Warcry is like a perfect combination of Kill Team 21 with the list building of Kill Team 18, where you can kind of take whatever you want. There are bespoke teams for Warcry, and there's also just rules for every single thing in Age of Sigmar, and you can just pick and choose your operatives. It's great. We played a game with the Caradron overlords, and it was just a ton of little guys with these dinky little pistols that don't do much damage, because the one kind of flaw of Kill Team 21 is it's so incredibly killy and your stuff gets sniped so easily. But we played like an entire 4-round game just shooting these guns off, just taking 1 or 2 wounds off here and there. It was great. You do want to like back off and not get too close to the pistol-y guys, but you're not just going to get zapped from across the board. It's really nice. Good old Age of Sigmar and Warcry. Some good stuff. But speaking of Kill Team, Games Workshop is bringing back the Space Marine Heroes Series 3. And of course, the greatest of all Space Marine heroes, the Death Guard. I was really sad when these guys left because I just discovered them like right on the tail end of them being available to purchase. I think I managed to get 3 of them, and they're all part of my Death Guard kill team, which the Death Guard, really fun and kill team. They have a 5-up disgustingly resilient, which I love those sorts of rules. It's like the old school Feel No Pain from Warhammer 40k. Every single time you would lose a wound, you take a dice, and you roll it, and on a 5-up you don't lose, and it's just a fun game you get to play with your opponent. Like your opponent's like, I deal 14 damage to you, you are dead. And then you're like, we'll see about that. And then you pick up a big handful of 14 dice and you shake them for a good long time while your opponent's sweating because they worked so hard to deal all that damage. And then you roll it and you still die because you didn't roll good. Or if you're Sean playing my Death Guard, then you roll beautifully and you tank half the damage. I love rules like that. The Ecclesiarchy also has I think a 6-up Feel No Pain. It's just so much fun. But these are some beautiful, beautiful miniatures. Not painted all that well from Games Workshop. I wonder if this is the heavy metal team. I don't know. But it's the same characters we all know and love. And the one that was Japanese exclusive forever. I forget what he's called, but he's got this. He's casting this spell of flies. It's like a sorcerer model. It's really, really good group of guys. I love that it comes with unhelmeted Death Guard heads. A very rare thing. You really have to go aftermarket if you want non-helmeted heads for your Death Guard. I think one comes in the regular Death Guard box, and it's like a helmeted head, and he's got like a gas mask on. So you just get the eyes and the forehead is all you get. And I really like all of my Death Guard to have bare heads because I just think it makes them look really unique and interesting. They've got these disgustingly kind of blue, orangey, green bodies and then a pink little head. I really, really like it. And so I'm really excited for these guys to hit the market again because I'm going to be able to pick up those non-helmeted heads real cheap on like eBay and Facebook Marketplace because most people like the helmets because the helmets are very, very cool. But I want all those helmetless heads. That's my jam. And I mean, if you want to play Kill Team, this comes with everything you'd want. It comes with a leader. Although in Kill Team, you probably want the leader to have a Power Fist, not the Plague Sword. But the Plague Sword is also very good. Of course, the Plasma Pistol is excellent. It comes with the Banner Guy and then 2 Bolter Operatives. You've got your Plague Thrower, although you'd probably want, or it comes with the Blight Spewer, and you probably want the Plague Launcher, because the Plague Launcher is just a little bit better. The Blight Spewer has a 6-inch range, which although is very good, it's not, you want the long range shooting with this team, especially because they only move 4 inches a turn. I really like the Death Guard and Kill Team. They play really, really well. They're one of the compendium teams that have kind of stuck around. They're just strong enough to be able to play with some of the big boys with the new bespoke teams that have been coming out in these doubles boxes. But I'm really excited to have these guys back. I definitely need the Fly Lord. That's what I'm gonna call him. He's the Fly Lord for my Death Guard army, which I'm gonna do eventually. There will be a few Death Guard painting videos, but I'm nervous. They take so long to paint. Oh, and Mortarion. Mortarion is one of the biggest models you can buy. And I have one of the most obnoxious and like tricky to pull off painting styles for my Death Guard imaginable. It's gonna be a challenge, but I'll get to it. I'll get to it. I love the Death Guard. Games Workshop did an amazing job of making the Death Guard cool. Because if you look back at the history of the Death Guard, originally they were just kind of melty Space Marines a little bit. They had some chinks in their armor, and they had big fat pot bellies. And then they got really disgusting when they made the change to Finecast, and they were kind of very grotesque. And then Games Workshop kind of came up with this tentacly, broken armory thing that is also disgusting, but it's disgusting in a really cool way, not like an off-putting way. And I think it really, really helps. And every single, since they figured it out, since they really nailed down the art style, every single Nurgle model they've made has been just top notch. I mean, every time I see Golden Demon, there's lots of Nurgle going on. Everybody loves painting Nurgle. It just gives you so much freedom and the ability to just do whatever you want in your miniatures and always have it look good. They're very much like the orcs. You just throw the paint on there and it works. It's really good. And that isn't even the only Kill Team news I have from this week, because this weekend, Scott the Miniature Maniac was over at the Eons of Battle studio, and we finally played a game of Kill Team. And I don't want to brag too much, but I did win. The game went all 4 rounds. I had 11 points, he had 5 points. He played the Sisters Novitiates, and I played the Beastmen, the brand new team, which are arguably a little bit overpowered in the game, but it was really fun. I love the Beastmen. I do hope that they get toned down just a little bit. They have a rule called Frenzy, which is basically the Space Marine rule only in Death is Due to End, where when they're incapacitated by an enemy, they're not removed from the battlefield until the end of their next activation, which I think is a very, very good rule for a team like the Beastmen, because the only option they have is close combat. So they have to spend the entire game charging the opponents. And that leads to some, like, maybe you're out of position, you're not in cover, you're not in these great positions that you normally do, because usually you're sneaking around in Kill Team, hugging cover, hugging large heavy terrain, just trying to keep your guys alive. But with the Beastmen, you just gotta charge. And so having a rule like only in Death is Due to End makes a lot of sense. The problem is it's a little bit too generous, because they cannot be killed with shooting at all. So you have a turn where you're completely safe from shooting. I think that's a little much. I think if they get shot at and dealt a crit, I think that should be enough to kill a Zangor with a Frenzy token, because it's still a huge buff. Like, your opponent has to, instead of spending 1 turn shooting at them, spend 2 turns shooting at them. Like, it's a pretty big deal still. But just having it not an option at all turns off so many shooting teams. And so I think that would be a very fair way to change it. And it probably should also be that if you're attacking if you kill a Beastman in close combat, they're just dead, because it also turns off other players' melee focused units. Like if I'm playing Space Marine, the Chaos Space Marine Legionary, I have some really, really good close combat units. I charge in, I just one-shot a Zangor, all of a sudden they're Beastmen, they're not dead. They're like a Necron, they fall over, and then immediately they reanimate, and then they strike me back. Like, it's impossible to properly charge a Beastman. So I think just those 2 changes, have Beastmen actually die in close combat, which I think is very reasonable. Like, if you're thinking about it from a lore and gameplay perspective, like, if you manage to knock down a Beastman in combat, you're probably gonna stick them a couple times on the ground and just make sure that they're down for good. So I think those 2 changes would clean up Frenzy. All of their other rules, I think, are actually fine. They have a few crazy heavy hitters on the team, but most of the Beastmen are actually pretty average. I think the Beastmen play really good. Even though I got so many more points than Scott did, I won on points, not bodies. At the end of the game, we both had 2 operatives alive and we both started with 10. So I think the Beastmen actually do play really well. I think they just need Frenzy toned down a little bit. The Beastmen might need a little bit of retouching. But you know it never needs a touch-up? That's right, our Patreon. Over there, we have a new STL train pack every single month. This month, we have the Gothic Modular Trenches. Beautiful modular trenches that can crisscross the battlefield with decorations suitable for both Imperial and Chaos factions. We also make one extra episode of Eons of Battle every single week where we take a look at our viewers' miniatures and give some ideas and critiques of how to improve their painting. We host live Discord hangouts, and we have a tier where you can get your name on one of my Black Templar Space Marines and you can join the crusade. And for anybody out there who enjoys watching a little live painting, we are now going to be streaming on Twitch every Tuesday and Thursday from 5:30 to 8 o'clock p.m. Central Time. It's going to be a really fun time. Mark your calendars and join us over on Twitch. Tons of really cool hobby-related stuff happened this week. And I really do want to give some of the old Games Workshop board games a try. I wonder how hard it would be to actually track some of them down. I think Games of Commorragh felt the lamest. So I think that's the one I would really like to give a try to. Thanks for watching.